You're listening to Game and Chat, where we level up with conversations about gaming then and now. I'm your host, Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo. So let's press start and game on. Welcome everyone to another episode of Game and Chat, streamed directly to your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or all of the above to support the cause. And with that being said, welcome everyone to episode 7. It's nice to be back. Yes, we took a little break. I put up, 7 episodes back to back basically, and I feel like I needed that extra week to get myself together a little bit, family-wise and all that. But we're back on the mic, and we are ready to talk about our next topic. I hope you guys have been doing pretty well. I hope you miss me. I miss you too. And today we are going to talk about one of my first loves in life and how that really made a huge impact, not only in me as turning me into a gamer, but also in the industry, and how this console that some people might look back now and say that it looks very ugly right now and everything looks bad and like doesn't age well, doesn't control well. What the heck is that controller about? Actually changed gaming landscape back in the 90s. Yes, guys, it is time to talk about the Nintendo 64, my very first console that I owned, officially gifted to me. We did have an NES back in the day. It was in a box, but I think there was something wrong with it and wasn't working. And I did play NES and Super NES before playing the Nintendo 64, but they weren't my own. So this is actually the first console that I was like mine and just mine. And I couldn't be happier to start my gaming journey with this generation in particular, because it brings some, if not some of the funniest and most cherished memories I have from my childhood, and everything that brought to me, not only in terms of like gameplay and entertainment, but also educational. I have a Nintendo 64 since I was 7 years old, and basically playing their games shape up my English language. You might say, well, Daniel, sounds very broken. I mean, it's not a first language after all, so we're doing our best here, guys. But anyway, my point being is this one of these moments in gaming that everything changed as we know it, and a lot of the things that we have today and we enjoy truly were because both the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1. The PlayStation 1 came out a year earlier, and it already started revolutionizing gaming in its own way, at least from the 2D perspective. And then when they finally made the jump to 3D, it was when Nintendo made the move first, and everything just started to change and be better for us gamers. And now we started experiencing fully real 3D gaming. And we want to talk about that today. We want to talk about how fun memories I have from the Nintendo 64. I'm sure for you guys, some of you guys that have listened before might have an idea or two of what those were. I'm going to revisit them a little bit. And also just how the Nintendo 64 really shaped up gaming going forward, not only with its design, the development time, the controller, that crazy controller that people up until this day remembers how crazy it was, and there's always a debate how you should grab the controller. And the games, some of the best games of all time came from the Nintendo 64, and up until this day we got them in such a high regard. And of course we're going to talk briefly about what those games are, which I'm pretty sure you guys know about this already, but we're going to touch on them. And of course, how did shape the landscape of multiplayer games. You were the first console to actually increase the multiplayer limit from 2 to 4 straight up from the console, and that's something that it was amazing and unbelievable to think of. It really defined the couch gaming experience as it is. And I keep saying this, and I'm gonna say it back again. that was one of the best generations, if not the best generation of gaming for me, when you have your friends over with pizza and you would just play 4-player Mario Kart, 4-player Mario Party, 4-player GoldenEye, and literally some of the most, if not one of the best gaming experiences I always will cherish. So we're gonna do a trip to memory lane, guys, and commemorate the legacy of the Nintendo 64 on episode 7 of Game and Chat. Nintendo 64, the console that changed everything. And of course, we're gonna get things started. Back in the day, when the Super NES was on its glory, with amazing games already showcasing the potential of what a 3D game can be, with Star Fox that released in the Super NES, on which it may been like pixelated, like geometric 3D, but it was still 3D. And just the fact that we were so close to getting that full 3D experience, but Nintendo was limited with hardware, was such a shame, because we could have gotten it so sooner. But then, you know, it just made it go really hard by developing now the Nintendo 64. Of course, from time to release, the Nintendo 64 first released in June of 1996. So that would be 28 years? 28 years. Oh my god, 28 years. I was old. The Nintendo 64 released it. And wow, that is incredible. I actually didn't put it on perspective before hearing that, but that is crazy. Even though it released later in North America that same year, but in September, of course, we're taking the first time the console was ever released in order to make this episode. But since that day, it's been magic from the moment it hit store shelves, and from the moment it was showcased back in the day on some of the old E3 presentations, which had another name, what I don't remember. I do remember is that it was named Project Reality at first, and then it was dubbed Ultra 64, and then finally came up with the name of Nintendo 64. And it's basically one of the first consoles to ever achieve this matter, and that's why it allowed it to really get the grasp of 3D gaming development as it should be. And it's just, you know, to think that we all saw those first demos back in the day of what a potential Legend of Zelda on this system could have looked. And the first time we saw Mario 64 playing, showing that now we went from side-scrolling 2D flat sprites gaming into actually a fully realized world, which back in the day, just seeing Super Mario 64 for the first time and having Mario just running in the courtyard right before entering the castle, the sense of freedom and the fact that you can move in a fully 360-degree angle with so much precision and so much, again, freedom. It's just that you can feel like you can do whatever you want. It's kind of like remind you of, you know, going outside and like play on the park, but now you're doing it from your couch in a video game on the screen on the TV. And it was something mind-blowing to see that they were able to achieve this. And you know, despite all the things that had against it on that regard, because of course we were making the transitions, other companies were making the transitions from consoles, from cartridges to CDs because of much space and being a little bit more flexible to work with. But the Nintendo stuck with the cartridge system, yet again managed to pull out wonders in terms of gaming development and 3D games, and the fact that the 64 bits of the Nintendo 64 allowing that, I had that advantage in regards to the competition. It really set a standard going forward, and it took a while for other companies to figure out and try to improve upon that. Sony, in this case, with the PlayStation, which eventually, introduced their 3D with their discs and really shake the ground even further. But this happened just because the Nintendo 64 pushed them to do so, and that's what we're here to appreciate. And like I said, sometimes we look back now and we will think that the console might look ugly, the Mario 64 and Zelda look ugly, underrated, and like they don't control well, the controllers didn't age really well. Back in the day, I mean, I was 6-7 years old when I saw this console, when I played this console for the very first time. I mean, and I don't know, I kind of wish to go back sometimes to those like young ages, because I think I was a little more slick in the game. Like I played Mario 64 early this year on the Nintendo Switch Online, and I'm kind of having a hard time. It could be it could be a lot of things. I mean, it's not running on native hardware; it's emulated, so there's gonna be some sort of like input delay. And not making excuses for myself. Like I know this game from the back of my hand, so I can definitely pull those things off. Not as easy as I used to, but just getting that controller and play for a little bit and take me back to those great early years of young kid innocent Daniel, playing nonstop Mario 64, Mario Kart, F-Zero X, Ocarina of Time. So many games I have fond memories from this, and just how once again Miyamoto and everybody who worked on the development of this console really put up something magical and something that will withstand the test of time. Even today, we still bring up the Nintendo 64. I have my Nintendo 64 very accessible because, yes, we have Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo 64, but sometimes you just want to plug in the hardware and see what I can do, and just get that little kick of nostalgia by playing on the actual thing. And that's one magic that not many consoles, even as recent as today, it's like the PlayStation 5 or even the Switch. I think the Switch might have recatched that a little bit with the whole like gaming, the whole play anytime, everywhere motto. But I feel like the Nintendo 64 feels a little bit more special just because of the fact it was our introduction to a new world completely, and it's something that will remain up until this day and for the near future. Like, it's unforgettable and will always be one of the top gaming experience of my entire life, seeing 3D for the first time and just the beauty that came right after this success. But now let's talk about some of the key features and innovations. We mentioned them briefly, but now we're gonna just dive in a little bit into it. Let's start off with one of the first ones that just jump right off the bat when we see the hardware itself, and that's the controller design. This, I would say that this is one of the most, if not the most memorable controller design ever made. Maybe right next to the GameCube being like the follow-up, of course, and like the perfected version of what the N64 controller was. But seeing that thing for the first time was so confusing because, again, at the moment, I mean, yeah, we might have seen like the newsletters and the conventions about how the controller was gonna work, but for someone, for example, like me, that didn't watch any of those like previews and you saw the console for the first time, going to my neighbor's house and seeing that controller with that 3-pronged design and then the stick in the middle, and like, how am I supposed to grab this? Coming from the NES and the Super NES, and very self-explanatory layout, and now we have this like 3-pronged thing in front of us. And now when you look at the screen and you know what you're playing, it all makes sense. It was and still is a revolutionary system that, carry on other controller designs later on for the Nintendo's history in general. The N64 controller is one of the first, if not the first, that allowed using the stick for precise 3D movement. It was actually designed to move in a 360-degree angle for games. We had sticks before, but the sticks basically was just a way for us to go in the 4 cardinal directions, but never a stick that you will actually have a Z movement, not just X and Y, that you can now use angle movement and circular movement, 3D movement, let's just call it that way. And this was the first time that we're able to do that. And the first time that we boot Mario 64, and again we find ourselves in the court, and then we figure out how to use the stick. And the fact that it's moving all in 3 directions was something so shocking back in the day. I know younger generations right now would say that, well, that's normal, that's how everything is, but no, it's like it's very hard right now with modern gaming to impress, just because we've seen a lot done so many times. But it's always good to appreciate how things came to be in the first place. And I really wish some of you young listeners wouldn't be there to see that revolutionary controller take the stage and introduced us to 3D movement as it did, because it was such a wonderful experience. And yes, I mean, we always have the D-pad on the side, and then we got introduced to the C buttons, which was like C, up, down, left, and right, basically another D-pad on the opposite side of the controller, along with the A and B buttons. We also got our shoulder buttons with L and R, and then right behind the joystick, we have the C button, which basically allowed us to feel like we were holding sort of a gun for shooting games. GoldenEye made the perfect example of this, and it worked really well in terms of design wise. Like, yeah, it might have sound clunky, and yeah, my people still would have figured out how to grab the controller. I mean, honestly, I all know always how to grab the Nintendo 64 controller. I never felt the need. I see that people grab them from the 2 outer handles where the D-pad is and the buttons are, and then they try to move the stick with their left thumb, extending it all the way. How do you guys even do that? Like, this is impossible. You clearly have to do it grabbing the left on the middle with the stick, and then the other one with the buttons, and that's how you play the game. Funny enough, there's not many Nintendo 64 games that actually allow the standard handle with the D-pad at the A and B. I mean, the only one I can remember right now is Pokemon Stadium, that it was more comfortable grabbing it that way, especially when you played the Game Boy emulator. It was much doable. But other than that, not many, maybe just very few handful games that would allow that configuration. But other than that, it's because, of course, everybody wanted to jump into the 3D aspect of the game and develop 3D movement for all of the games, and that's how the design came to be. Some of you might dispute the fact that, well, why don't you just put the thumbstick on the left side from the get-go? I mean, it's all about giving options to players too. We didn't know how this console was going to perform, or was it going to be like of interest of like other gaming developers. So yeah, the design might have been a little funny in terms of layout and design again, but it gives you the options, and Nintendo's always been known to give options to the players on how to play their games. And it started since the early days of the Nintendo 64, when just changed the layout of the controller, and it's up to you how you want to play it. Here's the layout, go nuts on our 3D games and 3D worlds that we're going to show up for you. And you can see that with all the games that came after that were like catered for this controller's designs. And of course, we're gonna bring up some of the main focus games that really use this feature and set the standards for game and game design. You know, Mario 64, we already said that. Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye 64, Mario Kart 64. So many games that we can mention. Diddy Kong Racing, I mean, the better racing game on the 64. Let's face it. There's no denying of like that's the case. And you know, despite some challenges that it had in terms of, like, you know, like storage, because cartridges doesn't allow as much storage as CDs could do. But then that really made them work out and think outside the box on how to compress and optimize these games. And up until this day, I mean, there's people at Nintendo that are currently developing a new console right now, and these are people that have been working since the NES. I mean, Miyamoto is the perfect example. Like, he's been there for almost more than 40 years now, maybe even almost 50. That's insane. And you know, it really tells about the work culture of the company too, and how they appreciate long-term employees that are still willing to give it their all, because everything they do is just successful. And how that really set up an example for other companies and games out there. It is insane. And to think that, you know, still carries on up until this day, all those values, not only on the hardware and gaming development per se, but just on the you know, employee sense. It's just great, and it really sets the bar for other people out there. And not only that, I mean, we're not talking about just the games itself, but also the fact that, you know, and I said this on the intro, this is the console that defined the concept of couch gaming. All of our houses, one of the first, if not the first, consoles who allowed 4-player games and four controllers connected to the same consoles. And you know, everything that came after, we had amazing nights like GoldenEye, Mario Party. I mean, Mario Party, who didn't have a Mario Party night with friends at their house? We can mention so many things. F-Zero X and their fast-paced gaming. Again, a 4-player F-Zero X race, it was so thrilling. And the fact that it still will run at 60 frames per second stable on the Nintendo 64, it's kind of like mind-boggling how fast-paced that game was, and like how the textures were still able to load that fast. You know, sometimes a game can go that very fast that the frame rate and the graphics cannot keep up. So you might have seen, and yeah, you see a couple of things, you see a couple like drops and like that on F-Zero. Like, it's not perfect, but the fact that the gameplay is crisp on a game such fast-paced and fast processing as F-Zero X is, it tells a lot on how this came to be. And all thanks of like how well they control, and all thought out on how the Nintendo 64 controller was developed. Yes, it has flaws, and yes, it's not perfect. Some of those details came a little more obvious as years went by, and even today, you might say that it's one of the worst controllers ever made. But for the purpose that was made of, it was just perfection. I mean, nobody will land the quirkiness and the gameplay mechanics and innovations like Nintendo do. And yeah, I mean, because of this, and then PlayStation eventually, when they released the first Crash Bandicoot, they brought out the PlayStation controller with the analog sticks at the bottom, which design was, yes, it was much more comfortable. It was, the stick it was better quality. In the end of the day, it's a Sony product, and they really nailed it with their thumbsticks there. But again, it has to be because it came from Nintendo, who reshape 3D gaming. Again, reshaping, changing the landscape. That's why the episode is called The Console That Changed Everything, from the hardware to the controller to the games to their experiences. And since we are talking about experiences, let's dive in a little bit on how this was a first of many things, not only in terms of like hardware and like games developed in a 3D space, but there were so many features that were first or they were revolutionary when the N64 came out. And we're gonna break this down into some of their biggest games that shape up the industry up until today. I mean, of course, first and foremost, let's get it out of the way. Super Mario 64, we already know that is the first game, or one of the first games to introduce a open world 3D environment. And, you know, it's the fact that the development team had to be innovative and create camera systems and controls to navigate this new space effectively. I'm sure they took years and pondering, because remember, way back when, these teams were just a handful of people that work in all these games. And the fact that they were able to come up with this is just amazing just by itself. And, you know, one of the better examples for this, because yes, you have 3D movement, but you should be able to look around and see everywhere. And that's how the dynamic camera system was born. I mean, the game introduced Lucky 2, the guy or animal, I don't know what you want to call it, holding the camera in game, who would like film, quote unquote, Mario's adventures. And, you know, it really helped us players adjust to the 3D navigation for the very first time by providing a more intuitive viewpoint in all these wonderful worlds that we can just go through inside the castle. And this is like how you're able to just turn around with the C buttons and see your surroundings and see that you can go there. It was just mind-boggling back in the day. I mean, we mentioned about the cartridges also, how despite being a little bit restrained on storage, it actually kind of allowed to increase the fast load times, because all Nintendo developers had to really innovate in terms of optimization of their games. And, you know, they had to find a creative solution to make it work. You know, of course, it's not going to compare to the CDs that were introduced by PlayStation that will like give you not only more storage space, but they will need to be incredibly efficient to compare with this and compress and make their data work and fit all these big games into the cartridges. And all these creative solutions that were born back in the day, we see them up to this day. We get games as big as Mario Odyssey. It's less than, what, 8 gigabytes, I think? It is insane. Tears of the Kingdom is only 16 gigabytes. And that's crazy. And that game is like way bigger than AAA games that you see today. That, yes, will increase on cinematics, but there's barely any replayability, or they're not even as great. And that's why the whole Iwata concept of, he knew that going for, you know, hyper realism graphics and like performance wouldn't matter if the gameplay isn't fun. Well, look where Nintendo is right now. Best-selling console of all time with the Switch, almost very, very close to the DS and the PlayStation 2. Not sure if it's gonna overcome them at the point. Maybe it will go second. But that's the perfect example. You don't need a powerhouse to be successful. You need fun to be successful. And the Nintendo 64 was a better example of that. Yes, maybe the support line didn't like go through with the third parties because of the limitations of the cartridge in the end. But there's no denying that what Nintendo released was revolutionary. And all the other companies did is try to implement those things in other games and bring them to the other platforms in the end of the day. But anyway, back to the first in many games. Of course, Ocarina of Time. When Ocarina of Time released, it was one of the first games, if not the first game, I don't quite recall, that implemented a real-time, quote unquote, day and night cycle, which this was like groundbreaking at the time. You can actually see time passing as you go and explore Hyrule, and you can go from day and night, and then the events of the game change depending if you are during the day or during the night. And how, you know, even the fact that when you're approaching Hyrule Castle as you walk out of Kokiri Forest for the very first time, and you can't make it to the castle grounds, and then as the wolf starts howling, the bridge starts to close, the doors of the castle start to close, and then you can't get in. You need to wait until the next morning when they open. That is crazy. Like you ask yourself, how would the games know to close the door at that time? And that's what's great. That's what's amazing. And it was one of the first, and it was very impressive. And you know what? In that game also, literally, since we were moving to a 3D space, and in case of Zelda, we deal with a lot of combat, they need to come up with a system that will keep the player focused on the target without getting lost on the 3D environment. That's what the Z targeted system came to be. And very, very simple when you look at it right now. You lock into enemies, and us players could easily manage fights and navigate the environment. But this brought so much influence into other 3D games that came after, and how well it worked for Ocarina of Time, and how that transcended up until this day. That it's almost like impossible, or almost insane that a action-based game would not have that feature after that. I mean, we can keep going with this. Like Star Fox 64, one of the first game to give us another sense of immersion with the accessory of the Rumble Pack. He was one of the first games, if not the first game, if I don't remember, to use the Rumble Pack, which it will allow us to our controller to vibrate during certain times and action sequence of the game, and give us, like I said, that sense of immersion and what they call in the day force feedback, by introducing haptics to us for the first time, and just basically make you even more immersed to that world, going through space in order to stop Andros from conquering the world. It's just innovative. It kept innovating. And GoldenEye 007, a game that almost came out as an afterthought to put on a Nintendo 64, is actually one of the most cherished games from the system. And how the split screen multiplayer really made us for so many fun afternoons with all those crazy cheat codes too while at it. It was just great. You would just go and just spend hours playing GoldenEye, and up until this day, it might have not aged well, but all that couch co-op gaming experience and multiplayer gaming experience, that not only with this game, but with so many other games like Mario Kart, Mario Party, all those examples that we mentioned before, will never compare to today even. Of course, it's more of an online, and you might say it's more accessible today to be able to play video games with people across the world via Wi-Fi. But let's face it, nothing's gonna compare to try to fight your friends while they're stalling their stars on Mario Party 3. But anyway, and other innovations that we can talk about. I mean, Banjo-Kazooie, my favorite game. Oh my God, the better platformer also on the 64. How to introduce dynamic music, on how it would change this, and being able to the music to adjust as you were being in certain areas of the game, and how will turn the instruments just on the spot. No loading screens, no pause menu, no black screen in between, no pauses. It would just literally shift, and as you advance. And it's just, we can keep going and going and going. All these are just little highlights of why the Nintendo 64 was so special, and how not only Nintendo, because there's also third-party games that they were using Nintendo's development kits in order to make these things happen that potentially couldn't achieve on any other consoles as efficient as his. And we owe that to a Nintendo 64. And it's amazing. Simple, yes, but amazing and efficient architecture. And it all comes down to how, because of all these first experiences that we got with the Nintendo 64, today it's being cherished and remembered dearly. And which is our next topic right now, how nostalgia really reflects on all these amazing games and first timers that we got with the Nintendo 64. We're gonna talk about it from a personal perspective, of course. Like I said, this was my very first console, and the way that it really like turned me into a gamer 100% is just insane. And you know, just like stories what I told before about me just hanging out on my neighbor's house playing while they were out playing soccer downstairs, I was still playing Mario Kart 64 to the point that my mom had to come pick me up. I have so many stories with my cousins that we would just, every gathering, we would just go play Mario Party 20, 35, 50 turns. We will clear up the one-player mode, taking turns and like laughing and suffering, trying to beat the 100 jump rope challenge on Mario Party 1. And all those moments that we spend trying to beat the water temple, because we will get stuck to finding that one last damn key that we forgot after all we've been through 3 hours on that freaking thing. And then just how fun it was to fight Ganondorf and all the lead up going up to the castle, and then just the whole sequence of him fighting him with the energy ball tennis match, and then escaping from the castle that was falling apart, and then final confrontation with Ganon. So many memories. I can keep Majora's Mask, like the whole experience is just unbelievable that it came from such an early game. By early game I mean like a game that was like supposed to be a sequel, and it was done under a year that was supposed to be like, you know, just like a placeholder basically while they were developing Wind Waker for the next console. And it ended up being so impactful in their storyline that up until this day is in such a high regard. Banjo-Kazooie, how big a 3D platformer can go, and like one of our first introductions to collectathons. That yes, Mario 64 had it with Star, but I think Banjo-Kazooie took it to a whole nother level, and then it doubled down when Banjo-Tooie released a couple of years later. And so many fun stuff we can touch on. Smash Brothers, the very first Smash Brothers came, and the whole idea of having your favorite characters from Nintendo battle it out on a platformer fighting game, and now it will come such a pinnacle of fighting games and gaming experiences up until this day, just because Masahiro Sakurai had the crazy idea of putting Mario and Link dunking it out in an arena, and being one of my favorite games ever up until this day. So many, like I can't even name just how many fun memories we had with the 64, and I would dare to say that is the console that we get most nostalgia from up until this day. Because yes, we can feel nostalgia for all the even more retro stuff like the NES, the Super NES. I would say more the Super NES, because we get a little bit more of a, you know, it's more, characters are more colorful, the images are more like vivid, and you know, just despite of all the retro stuff, NES, Super NES, Atari, if you want to go even like back farther, it's more so like the innovation of like how to make a video game and how make all those pixels work in an entertainment way. Then when the SNES, we took those pixels and we elevate them to give them a pop of color, and more with more development tools we can have more defined worlds and interactions. And then it all came to be when we translate that into the 3D space with the Nintendo 64, and now we can merge both of the things together and create something unforgettable. Yes, this is the console that will draw more nostalgia for players, I would dare to say. Or, you know, it's okay if you feel differently, but for me, that's what it is. We all look back to the early eras of 3D gaming and so many franchises that were born during that time, and we can debate whether today's iterations of all those games are better than their predecessor counterparts. However, it is such an amazing time, and you know, it all came down to how how I actually ended up getting the console for the first time, and you know, just remembering that I wanted it for Christmas, and then after playing it on my neighbor's house in 1998. It was 1998, and I was very clear. I said, I want the Nintendo 64. Please give me the Nintendo 64. I wrote my letter to Santa. And then, you know, in Venezuela, we have this tradition of celebrating Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. And then at midnight of Christmas Day, I exchange the presents. We will first do so with our families, and then the child Jesus, that's how we call it, El Niño Jesus, which is Santa basically for Venezuelan culture, Christmas culture. Will bring it up. So it was funny because I remember just getting my presents and, you know, putting aside all my socks and underwear that I got that I didn't appreciate today. That is the best gift you can give me, by the way. If you guys want to donate or send me something, socks and underwear will make my day because I need them so much. But anyway, I remember being next to the tree, and you know, it was 12:15, 12:30, and of course the whole thing was they were trying to get me outside so they can put the present in, you know, secretly. And then for some reason I ended up, like, I was trying to get to fit inside. I was like, where is it? It's like almost an hour and I'm not getting drowsy. Like, I want to go. Where's my gift? And then I remember, I think I was going to my bedroom for somewhere, and then I noticed the light on my mom's bedroom turning on, and then I see this big box, and you know, nobody was there, and we were done with the presents, and I was like, oh my god, it can't be. I remember saying exactly those words, and then I started wrapping up the paper, and it was the Nintendo 64 with the purple transparent controller and the regular controller. So I had the two controllers, and he came up with F-Zero X and Mario 64, and it was like that kid on the memes from like the early 90s, exactly that yes, I got the Nintendo 64. I feel like the whole building heard me scream. Oh my god, literally, I know I was 8 years old. It was one of the best days of my life when I got that console in, which, funny enough, after that, I just remember opening it, and I think I fell asleep immediately because I don't remember playing it right away. I remember waking up very early in the morning, and I found that they played it. Like, I guess my cousins, my sisters played them. It was already like installed for me so I can play in the morning, and then I start playing F-Zero X and, you know, crashing all over the place. I was like, what the hell, man? This is so hard. But, you know, I think, like, console-wise, I think that's the most one I really, really, like, have a soft spot because of how special it was. And, like, that console carried me over for so long because I did not have a GameCube. So I kept playing Nintendo 64 even when the GameCube was out. So it really carried me for, like, at least 8-9 years straight. So until I finally got hands on my Wii. So it's very special to me. And like I said before, and I'm going to say it one more time, I think most of you can agree that a lot of the memories will come from the Nintendo 64 because all those games that are based on today are based on this amazing system. And all I can think of is that I wish I can feel that same way again. You know, of course, I'm an adult. It's not going to be the same way. However, the Switch was very close. And what the Switch has done for the retro gaming perspective has been amazing, and I cannot wait to see if we're ever gonna relive that same experience. And with that, we are reaching the end of this retro episode of Game and Chat. It's worth mentioning though, before we actually do, is that, like we said, the Nintendo 64 changed gaming in all possible ways and inspires so many good titles and amazing gaming experiences that we have today is because of what this console and their games did in the first place. Not to mention, to forget, that was the last console to use cartridges, and then when the GameCube came out, they eventually moved to the disc format, although they still stick with mini discs instead of regular discs. Nintendo always tried to like set themselves aside from the competition somehow until they eventually cave in when the Wii came out. And I mean, kudos for that, because even when they stick to their own principles and just with the different format among other companies, most of the games were more successful than those with the other companies. Like I said before, the Nintendo 64 is more about the gameplay experiences and the replayability and the multiplayer aspect of their games that other consoles do not have. And yes, PlayStation might have amazing top of the line single player experiences, but you always will have a Nintendo 64 to play Mario Kart and to play multiplayer games with your friends, because their reward of experiencing that is just unique, and it's something that you won't get anywhere else. That's why the Nintendo 64 is my second favorite console of all time. I have to say the Switch took over for different reasons. I believe nostalgia will always bring me back to a Nintendo 64. I still have a Nintendo 64. I have my EverDry cartridge. I haven't used it in a while, so I tried to plug it in just to try a couple of things. There's a new mod with Super Mario 64 that basically made Mario Maker. I made it to work on my PC, but I wanted to try it on the TV, but it's giving me an error. So now I'm researching, because it turns out my EverDry cartridge is a little old. So supposed to work. So we're still working on that. But just like installing the console again and like grabbing the controller and like just turning it on, and it just takes me back a little bit. And you know, yes, we have this we have Nintendo Switch Online and we have emulator, but somehow when I grab the console, plugged in my controller and turn it on, that little click sound when you turn on the Nintendo 64 like triggers so many memories at that moment, and it made me happy, and it made me smile, and took me back to all those like good times that we have in the 90s, playing all these games on our old TVs. And like I said, I miss that feeling, and I hope we get to a point, maybe with the Switch even, maybe 10 years from now, we'll look back at the Nintendo Switch as that nostalgia console and relive all those like amazing memories. Who knows what game's gonna look like in 10 years? Technology and all development advances in a very, very exponential pace. So it's gonna be very interesting going forward where we're at ourselves as human beings and as gamers. So maybe, like I said, we will look back at the Switch as now the nostalgia console, and because it really made an impact on me. And you know, I mentioned it in our second episode, Nintendo Switch 7 years later, how this really changed the game again for Nintendo and gaming in general. But it wouldn't have been possible in the Nintendo 64 wouldn't release. That's the console that started to change everything, and I think the Nintendo Switch did it again on a different way, solidifying why Nintendo are the kings of innovation, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But anyway, this is gonna be the end, guys. Thank you so much. We are on the imminent announcement of a direct, or an imminent direct this week that might already happen when this episode releases, so you're sure gonna hear my thoughts on the next episode about the Nintendo Direct, if it happens, and if not, we'll keep speculating and we'll keep hoping that it comes through and all of our wishes come true for, you know, some of us who wants Banjo-Kazooie one day remastered. Instead, we got the bootleg. No, I mean, no worries. I mean, Yooka-Laylee was made for people that work on Banjo-Kazooie, so I'm actually very excited that it's getting remastered, because if they really fix the controller scheme, I'm gonna enjoy that game so much. I really try to like push through it, but it got a little too clunky, and I was I'm just gonna wait off. I might just play Banjo-Kazooie on the Xbox, which is already sort of remaster-ish. But yeah, I mean, Banjo-Kazooie remaster, Metroid Prime 4, the Zeldas, the ports of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Who knows what's gonna happen? It might be the last Direct of the Nintendo Switch, and it's gonna be very special. We're gonna look back to this one, because after this Direct, I hope we get the announcement of the next console, which I'm expecting to happen by September, which will be the Direct spot for that. Maybe there is one Direct that will announce games that will be for both consoles for next year, and maybe we'll get a reveal in October, just like we did with the Switch, with the first Switch. October 6th, we got the announcement of the Nintendo Switch. Maybe they will do it again with the Switch 2, Super Switch, whichever you want to call it. We look forward. We are in the eaves of the generational leap. Maybe not as huge as from the Wii U to the Switch, because again, this is supposed to be just an iteration more powerful of the current console. However, we cannot wait what Nintendo has been cooking for the past 7 years to wow us one more time. And I want to hear your thoughts too. First of all, I want to hear your thoughts about Nintendo 64. How do you find the console? Did you enjoy the console? You know, maybe you didn't enjoy it. Maybe you thought it was too hard to control, or the control you didn't like it. I want to know that. I also want to know, for those who love the console just as much as I do, what's your favorite games? What are your favorite memories of your childhood while you play these amazing games? Do you like Mario 64 more than Ocarina of Time? Do you like Majora's Mask more than Diddy Kong Racing? Do you like Mario Kart more than Diddy Kong Racing? Vice versa. Let's debate a little bit. Please comment. Please share your thoughts. You guys know where to find me at this point, but I'm going to repeat it again. I'm all the way across social media except for Instagram. So that leaves X, aka Twitter, or Blue Sky. You can also find me on Twitch. We do the 1-2 Switcheroo live experience every week, or at least we try to do so. So find me on twitch.tv/12switcheroo, or look for the VODs at YouTube at 12switcheroo. But for everything else, you can find me here on the next episode. So thank you so much for listening and supporting so far, everybody. I really appreciate it. This is Daniel, aka 12switcheroo, signing off. Game on.